Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dagger, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Tim Lewko. Tim is the CEO and manager partner of the Thinking Dimensions Global company and managing director of the Global Strategy Practice. In his 15 years of international experience, he has had the unique opportunity to assist over 35 CEOs and managing directors across 4 continents with their strategic transformational issues. Tim, I would like to welcome you and tell you I enjoyed reviewing your new book, Making Big Decisions Better.
Well, Joe, thanks very much for that introduction, and very excited to be with you today.
Without it being too much of an elevator speech, can you give me a little background on your company? Do you call it TDG?
TDG, it's a few less letters to spelling out the whole thing, Joe. So TDG is fine.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about it.
Sure, I'll give you a little bit of a background. Our company is based formally out of London in the UK. We have 10 partners globally and just over 200 resources who work around the world with companies. One of the founders, which perhaps some of your listeners or viewers might know, was Chuck Kepner. Chuck Kepner was one of the guys who wrote The Rational Manager back in '58, was known as one of the guys who helped on bring back the Apollo 13 guys, and is the genesis of what we do, which is basically experts at problem solving and decision making. And I specifically have carried that into the strategy arena.
Well, I think I got a couple of books back on my bookshelf with Kepner's name on the back of it.
I think so, yeah. Chuck 93 passed away last year, but we have a good pedigree of what works in companies and what doesn't.
Sure. He wrote some books that were really timeless. I think I still pull the one problem-solving one out occasionally. I forget the name without looking back there. But what we're here for is to start talk about your new book, and let's set some boundaries, okay, around making big decisions better. What constitutes a big decision?
Yeah, that's the question that got the title. Big decision in the strategy and in the book is around 3 things. It's either a product decision to offer, not offer, Joe. It's a market or customer geography, and it's capabilities, what companies need to invest in to connect the products to the markets and, frankly, make money.
Is this format, I have to ask, can I use it to make a small decision with, or is it just too weighty for that?
No, absolutely. As I said in the introduction, and actually in the book, there's tools, is at the end of the day, strategy and companies who create strategy, it's a series of decisions. And when you start looking at it that way, there's really a process, and it goes back to our legacy. You know, what's the decision? What's the criteria? What are your alternatives? Evaluate them, make a choice. And as simple as that process is, whether it's a small decision, whether you're deciding to buy the couch or the chair, or you're trying to invest in one company or the other, at the end of the day, when we work with companies, you ask them, you know, what's your process on how you make decisions? Usually what we hear is we debate alternatives. And so absolutely you're welcome to use whatever in the book for big or small decisions, Joe.
I enjoyed the book. Okay, I'm a process guy, right? Okay, so you know that hit me pretty well, but it was a strategic book. I thought, you know, it was sort of a how-to strategic. That's what I took from it. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. It is a book for, you know, and I said for executives, or I really kind of like the phrase P&L practitioners. That means it could be somebody with a small company all the way up to, we've worked with organizations in the billions, but it's really a how to set and use business strategy, practical terms that you actually have kind of like control center with the tools, and you can actually be pragmatic and use it. So it's a book for people wanting to drive their business, grow their business, and not get caught up in PowerPoints, paperwork, or endless meetings.
Well, you know, it's a rarity in the world of strategy, okay, that we kind of have this outline, a process developed, okay? Where did it start with you? Where did the process develop for you?
Well, the process was really over about 18 years. Now, just digress a little bit, is When I started in consulting almost 20 years ago, I was one of the guys who put together the bubble charts. And we went in with the big team of 12 people, presented the deck of 225 slides, fantastic analysis. Joe, the colors on the bubble chart was perfect. But in fact, nothing ever got implemented. And at the heart of it, I'm quite old school, is that you have to create value and people have to use the tools to create value for their business. And so over time, in working with some various organizations, I found that a process for strategy was lacking, and B, at the end of the day, and really what constitutes in the book, it's pretty simple about let's figure out what's going on and where we are. 2, let's make some choices, because everybody will most likely give me the rope here that strategy is about what you do and what you don't do. And 3, from a process standpoint, let's put a plan together and then actually let's use it. And that was really a pragmatic way that I think soaked in over time, and really from working globally in companies to see what's working and what's not, I came to a very simple process that resonates any industry, any size company, very simple.
I don't want it to come across wrong in something, but it seemed to have more of a financial, more of an accounting, more of a type sense to the book. That it wasn't, this thing that's out there, a bunch of sticky notes and, let's get a bunch of people together and brainstorm and put some sticky notes up there and hammer out a strategy for the next 5 years, okay? It was more of, let's get some assumptions, let's put some meat behind it, okay? Yep. and some data behind it. And was that, I assumed that was the intention of the book. Am I being too hard on it to say it seems kind of accountant-y or something?
Well, no, I think first of all, I'd give you a strong compliment that there needs to be a strong financial aspect that gives any of the tools and really the book some teeth. And the reason for that, and then I'll go back to answer the other parts of your question, but the reason for that is there's lots of strategic ideas and ways and frameworks, models and ways that you can kind of visualize things, and that's needed. But at the end of the day, we have to bring back to how do we actually integrate into a company, use it, hold people accountable, and really, what's our score for success? And at the end of the day, that's profitability. So I'm glad that jumped out at you, because a lot of times companies think that a strategy process is going to be kind of a motivational speech, and it's not. But to go back a little bit, and I think a little bit of what I'm reading into what you're saying is that I define strategy as it's a framework of choices. So these big decisions that actually drives the nature and direction of the business. And at the end of the day, what we're about and where we're going is pretty weighty stuff. If you're a CEO, if you're an executive on the leadership team, or somebody running a country. And there is a blend between, if you will, creativity and brainstorming, kind of the mess of success. But at the end of the day, walking through each of those tools, it actually channels that creativity and, if you will, brainstorming into something that's actually practical and usable. So I would say you're right on both aspects of that.
You talk about in the book that strategy is not a linear process. It is iterative.
Right.
And we live in this agile and we're all talking about complexity and that type of things. How do you really create some iterative, okay, that is not borderline winging it, I guess, I need to say here?
Yeah, I'd probably answer it this way. One part of it is, in terms of what I mean by iterative, is in the book I outline a strategy process, kind of 4 steps: appraise, decide, plan, use. But when you're actually creating the strategy, there is soak time involved. So in the event of creating the strategy. And so what I find is that people want to kind of follow the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, but a lot of times they don't want to have the soak time, where at the end of the day, you really need to sit back and synthesize. Again, the tools set the table for that, but there is this yin and yang of creativity and kind of the data behind it. So it's a blend of the two. But the thing about winging it or not winging it, that's one of the things where I would say that most times in companies, if you ask this question, Joe, how long, and maybe I'll ask it too, what's the average time frame for a strategy? What would you say the top 2 answers are?
Oh, the top 2 answers for a strategy, and you mean for the lifetime of a strategy?
Yeah, how far out should we look? What's the top two answers?
Oh, I would think a lot of people would answer 3 to 5 years. I would probably answer, within a year, within a year of it.
Yeah, and so you're right. The answer that most times we get, it's we have the 3 to 5 year plan. And I said, wow, 3 to 5 years. So how can you look out that far given the changes going on? They say that's what corporate said, or that's what I read, and really it comes back to it's a decision. That's one of the first decisions we help companies with is how far out do you want to look? And we work with some companies. This is back to the winging it, that their industry, particularly in technology, and it depends, but their industry is changing so fast. To try and say they have a 5 year plan is not really worth the thinking on paper. And so timeframes are a choice. But using the strategy, and this is the key thing, in industries that are changing rapidly, you should be looking at your strategy to make mid-course corrections. It's not I'm changing the goalposts all the time, but it's making those corrections because you have the tools, and again, they're in the book, that allow you to understand what's working and why, and what you can change to what impact. And so it's not winging it, but it's responding to the nature of the industry you're in, and frankly, the appetite and direction of your company.
This is an ongoing process. Strategy isn't something we set. We break it down to a couple objectives we're going to hit and a couple, tasks we're going to do, and we go back and look at if we're hitting our strategy at the end of the year. Then, right? That's kind of a no-no.
Yeah, and I even note that is that some people go, we set our strategy in January, and sure enough, December, we're going down to Florida with the team to review it. And I said, so what happened between the other 10 months? Nothing changed in the industry. Everything worked well. No new competition, etc. Well, there's some changes. Yeah, so you need to use your strategy to respond. And again, the tools that we have around the assumptions, PMC Engine, and goals are really the fundamental one-pagers that allow you to think through the business and respond to the changes appropriately.
I like the concept that kind of in the framework that it's something that you use so that you're always working on your strategy as part of how you do business.
Yeah, I would probably refine it by saying you're using, as customers buy things or not, as competition comes in or not, you've set how you want to compete and win in the marketplace. You're not necessarily changing that whole nature and direction of what the business is about, but you are making adjustments because information flows through external to internal. You see what's working, and you need to make those changes, whether it's a positive, as I say, or a negative gap. And just let me give you one example, just because I saw it this morning and I knew one of my clients would be probably thinking through their assumptions. I saw that the price of oil dipped, and one of the companies we worked with recently, their business was fundamentally based on the price of oil. They set an assumption really from a high point and a low point, and depending on where that went, because again, they can't predict oil as much as they'd like to, but I saw it dipped under a $50 mark, which means that they are probably in the process now of making some adjustments to where they're going to allocate resources to still deliver on their profit number, because they're a public company. So it's about using the data that flows through, because the business is dynamic, companies are dynamic, but you have a grounded set of tools that allows you to focus on the relevant rather than the red herring.
Let's dive into one tool or something, since we've talked about it so much, and there's a couple in there. But one area that caught my eye was the PMC Engine.
Correct.
What is it, and why is it important?
Well, the PM, and thanks for asking that. That's kind of the central decision-making, framework for strategy. And let me start off by saying this way: is that products, working in a lot of companies, you usually get the slide that somebody has said, here's how our products are performing. Okay, great. The next slide becomes, and let's talk about our markets. Here's how we're doing in Europe. Here's how we're doing in South America. And, for the last 15 years, on almost every company I went into, I said, why don't we connect products to markets? And the CEOs, in all fairness to them, super smart guys, successful guys or girls, and they said products to markets. That sounds like a good idea. It makes sense. I thought, yeah, it makes sense, because you need a product to a market. But putting this tool in place, it implies really clearly a couple things. Here, the products that you have and the customers that you serve right now, those are choices that your company has made. Whether they're deliberate or not, most times they've evolved over time, but that really is what you sell to who, is the nature and direction of your company. And that's one of the tools that we dive into. So what are the criteria for what products you should sell or not sell? And the same thing, of course, for markets. What customers should you sell to or not sell to? And when you put that together and then, if you will, integrate numbers or targets, because they have that, then it becomes real. And you start using that because you put in your budget for the year, and then you track it against actual. And Joe, really how it unfolds in terms of using it and why it's critical is the usual comment CEOs get is, hey, how's your business going? And the simple answer is it's fine or it's not fine. But that's such a nebulous question. The real question becomes what products against what markets are performing. And the best CEOs that I work with, they always want to know, and why are we winning or why are we losing? And this is the one-page tool that allows you to track it, set relative priority to products and markets, and then be able to allocate scarce resources. And that's why this PMC engine is really the economic control center of being able to make your strategy visible, use it, and as I said, importantly, understand what's not working or working and why. And CEOs and executive teams love it.
Oh, it caught my eye right away as I was going through the book, and it reminded me of that product market. I mean, because it is so relatively important because it really ties both sides together and gets away from generalities. With that, I guess is what I want to say.
Absolutely. And it also begs the question is, and I'd use it with this example, is that when you ask the question, so why do you compete in this product segment, and you're competing in this geographic segment with these customers? What's the criteria? And if there's 10 people at the executive team meeting, you know what, Joe? There's probably 10 different answers. And that's okay. I said, that's okay. But our job's to get down to the critical few so that once you arm executives and people in the organization with criteria, you empower them. And I don't use that word a lot, but you empower them to make decisions relative to the strategy. And it's just a clear way to get things done.
Oh, I definitely like that. You're a service company. Do you have an SMC engine?
And actually in the book, I think at some point, whether it's products or markets, products can be services as well. It's really what you offer to a customer and they give you money. That's what kind of goes at the top part of that. And the same thing back to the market. Someone said, well, is it geographies or customers or industry segments? You can have multiple segmentation, but it's essentially the path your product or service flows to when somebody finally pays you money.
PMC, it forces you really to make choices on real data then, facts, okay, and identify the assumptions, I guess I want to say. Is that, and I think I'm taking it directly from the book, I believe.
Yeah, well, you've kind of given me a nice lead-in that says that's why the first kind of part of the tool is what are the key assumptions externally that your business is really based on. What is the industry assumptions? From that, you really think through as a team, we believe this is how the world will roll out. And from there, you have to make choices on products, markets, and capabilities, which, is capital, people, time, energy, money. And that's, again, where that's a bit of the elixir in the recipe. We bring the tools. The company has to think through that and own that. But to your point about data, it's an outside-in approach that says, rather than, we want to grow our business 30%, okay, so how did you come up with the number? If the market growth for the last 10 years has been 4, unless you have a brand new mousetrap, how would you ever get that through organic growth alone? They said, oh, well, we really haven't thought of it that way. We came up with a number. So whether it's examples about setting goals or understanding how to compete and win, it is about data-driven decision-making and putting it right in front of the owners of the business. And it just clarifies things and, again, make sure they execute it because they own it.
Yeah, and I love it because of the fact that, we're going to grow sales by 5% next year. or 10%, right? It's like, okay, all right, let's break that out and see what that really means within your business, okay? Where's it going to come from then, Ned? And who are you going to take market share away from, or are you going to create new market share? And you start looking at it that way, and it's a whole, you actually get away to that 5%. Really changes the way you look at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of bookend that whole conversation, practically speaking, when we work with whether it's large organizations, kind of 500 million and up, or even smaller, at the end of the day, we said, so what was the growth rate over the last few years, that kind of ended up after budgeting? Well, we're in a pretty fast-paced market, a lot of opportunities. I understand that. It must be very dynamic. Yes, it is. And they say, well, we arrived at 10%. I said, wow. 10%. Yeah, which probably should have been more. I said, well, the market growth rate is 25 and you're happy with 10. Well, not really. And so we kind of get away from this hocus pocus to what's possible. What does that look like from an investment standpoint? What are our capabilities? And actually, here's what we can deliver for a return. And it's just, it becomes more motivating because it's not the wild guess, if you will.
I was going to ask you the question, who's the book best suited for? And CFO or the CEO would be a natural someone to grab a hold of this book and like it. But what I want to go one step a little farther before maybe even answer that one is what tools do you see? Who do you see using what the tools in the book? Have you seen the operational guys, or have you seen anyone in marketing grab a hold of a certain tool and say, I want to be part of it? Or has it been mostly that CFO?
Yeah, no, I'd start probably at the top and give you a couple of examples is, the buyer, the people we work are the CEOs and presidents, and then the executive teams, because they own the strategy, that's their responsibility. However, who's it for other than the obvious choice of, and that's why I use this word, the P&L practitioner. So anybody who really has a P&L, which means for the most part, they have some product and some market concept. So it could be the CEO down to a country manager, down to there's even versions of, if you will, the PMC Engine that sales managers use with their territories, because it's just a double click down of priorities. So it is for a range of people, for sure. Operational guys in itself, if you will, or operational people, it's not an operational book. It's, it's not how do you manufacture something more efficiently, but what it does do, whether you're HR, finance, whatever function you're at, the tools and the strategy that's embedded because of that, it actually gives you priorities. It helps set you your priorities. And an example of that, if product one and market one, just to keep it generic, was the highest priority for the business to grow, becomes very obvious by looking at a PMC Engine to a marketing person. And they then say, okay, so how do we operationalize this, or what's required to market, since we know that that's a priority in the business? And what it does, if you actually talk to functional folks, they just go, thank you very much for putting together the strategic tools, because now we have direction and we have guidance about what we should be doing, rather than the flavor of the day. But the other thing I would say about who can benefit from the book, and we do see this a lot, is anyone who wants to move up in the business and has sights on presidency or CEOs or just high performers. They're encouraged to pick up the book, because as they get up to those next layers, they're expected to think strategically. And if they've been operationally doing things, whether sales or whatever function, for a long time, it's hard to shake your brain when the CEO goes, hey, Jim, what can you tell us strategically what you think the business should be doing? It's hard to shake that. So this gives them a proven set of tools, and really transportable, I tell, if you will, the high pose or people who are moving up, that you can think through the business issues and be ready to have a response that is strategic rather than a tactical or operational one.
Well, we always talk about how to get to the leadership table, and there are those just few that are selected, okay, because it's a small leadership table typically. And,
right.
And to be able to talk the language of leadership is what you're saying here, that this book is a good primer for that.
Absolutely, because it does happen all the time, and you've probably seen in your experience where, aside from the few, I joke a little bit with my clients, aside from the chosen few around the table, they know where the hypos are, and once in a while they can be asked to come into meetings or participate. And what basis do they have to think about strategy? And if they don't kind of have that set of tools or that backdrop to think through, they can come off sounding very flat or very operational, and this gives them that kind of edge that many companies don't provide.
Well, when you think about it, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people that the book is not that large. It's a very condensed book, but I'm going to tell people it's not going to take you less time to read it, because you're going to read it 2 or 3 times.
It was a bit funny with that on the publisher, is that I said, when he asked me to write the book, said, how big is this got to be? He goes, you'll know when you know. And, he goes, I need something, it's got to be over 100 pages, no cartoons. I said, okay, I can do that. But as you start distilling, the broad experience I've had and the opportunities, do you really want a long book that someone's not going to use anyway? So I really focused on distilling the key points in the book to things that were meaningful and people could get through and actually use. And again, I think it's a readable book. It's a handbook, as you mentioned, and it's something that, again, you can pass down to your managers or whoever else.
Oh, I have to agree with you. I definitely agree. And I don't mean that as not anything but a compliment, that you're going to read it 2 or 3 or 4 times, okay? And you're going to use it to work through the different things. I'm very impressed with it. So what's the best place for someone to contact you? Is there a book website and to learn more? And is there any tools that you can download or anything?
Yeah, you can go to timluko.com. So there's an author website. On that, it does a couple of things which I think are important for anybody thinking about reading the book. There's probably 10 or 12 CEO endorsements. And why I say that is the majority of companies that we work with, CEOs don't have to endorse anything. But these guys use the tools. They have success. They're happy to do it. So there's some credibility to it because it's practical. So there's people now using the tools. 2, on that website, as you said, it outlines the chapters, and there are some downloadable tools. And there'll be more coming, because at the end of the day, actually, as Chuck Kepner said to me, he goes, if people aren't trying to take your stuff, you're probably doing it wrong. So don't protect it, give it away. And it's important that people really see that there are tools that you can use to, whether it's making your business or your career more successful, they're there for you, and it's timluko.com.
Okay, well, Tim, I want to thank you very much. I appreciate it. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 podcast. So I want to thank all the listeners for listening.